Yes, I mean, I used to always overbet turn here, like not on low turn cards, for example. And I felt that like I could definitely be betting wider, and I was losing a big part of like EV with like my medium strength hands, where like I just like he can call the flop, and then I just bet King X on the turn with an overbet. And I don't really put him in a tough spot. So like on those low board, and we're going to see also with the Pio Sim that like it's actually betting quite often on the turn on a 6, and then it's quite different on an ace. I mean, Amar, like he's going to have to call some ace-x as well versus the 2/3 spot for sure. So yeah, so on the ace turn, I mean, it's only going to be overbetting here. So again, like think about like how wide do I want to be value betting? Like on a 6, can we comfortably bet something like 5, 6, 6x, 7s, like King X, like King 4? Like yes, I mean we want to be betting those for sure. So we use sizing that fits our range a bit better. So something like 2/3 spot. And then when the turn is higher, so it's an ace. I mean, are we still betting a hand like pocket 5s? No. I mean, we're going to be polarized. I mean, this example specifically is not great because the deuce is paired. So like pretty much all of the ace-x actually split. But let's say the turn is like king, deuce, 4, and then the turn is an ace. I mean, we would only overbet or check because we are only betting a strong top pair or better, and we're not betting hands like pocket 10s, for example. Sorry. All right, so we can see on the left here, on the left, we can see that like it prefers only the overbet, right? So like it's like all the sizings shift to the overbet. So like it's using some like ace 10 plus, and then some bluffs. And then on the right, we can see that like the sizings actually shift to like it's blocking and also using like 2/3 spot. So like we can do a mix of like, I don't know, something like 60% kind of makes sense. And then we can see that like pocket 3s, pocket 4s, pocket 5s, 6s, 7, I mean 6s obviously, but 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s. Like those hands get bet at a higher frequency. Also, take a note into like pocket 3s will get bet at a higher frequency than pocket queens. Why? Because pocket 3s needs a lot more protection than pocket queens, for example. So a hand like, again, like the lower pocket pairs like 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s gets bet at a higher frequency than 10s, jacks, and queens. So the hands that we're going to be checking are the less vulnerable pocket pairs like 10s, jacks, and queens. And then the ones that are more vulnerable, right? So the 3s, 4s, 5s, all those gets bet at a high frequency. And then we can still bet hands like King 8 plus, for value, and then check our really bad kings and that type of stuff. Do you guys understand what I'm trying to explain here? All right, so let's keep moving on. Yeah, I'm digging a bit into what Amar has been saying, where like the deuce X is pretty irrelevant. Now, I think this example is not the best because on ace turn specifically, it's always going to be overbetting no matter what the paired card is. But we're going to be talking about that a bit later. But let's say the paired turn, the board is 9-9 deuce rainbow. The turn is a king. Then I would never use an overbet because the 9-9 is a lot more relevant than the deuce X, for example. But we're going to be talking about that right now. Now, so now we open the button. Board is ace 8-8 deuce rainbow. We are actually c-betting range here. Villain should be check raising quite a lot. But I mean, that's not what they're going to do. So basically we can get away with c-betting at a high frequency. But even without that, it's still c-betting like 8-8 deuce at a really high frequency. So now, how do we approach turn on paired boards? What we need to be thinking about is how relevant the paired card is to big blind's calling range. So whenever the paired card is like 6-6x to ace-x, we don't really overbet on turn because villain can still have plenty of trips in his range. So let's say the turn is a king or a 5, for example. I mean, we're still going to be wanting to bet hands like pocket 5, pocket 6s, 7s, 3s, ace deuce, like those type of hand, like pocket 10s, pocket jacks. We still want to be betting pretty wide. So, and also we have to acknowledge the fact that he's still going to have some trips. So basically, we use a regular 2/3 or regular 3/4 sizing. On other less relevant paired cards, so like deuce, deuce X, 3-3X, we can afford to be putting in more money into the pot. So for example, if the board is 8-8 deuce, turn 10, right? I would stick with a regular 2/3 sizing with my entire betting range. But if the board is, for example, 8 deuce deuce, turn jack, then we can actually size up with our entire betting range and bet something like, I don't know, 90% or 100% pot. We're going to be talking about that. I'm going to be diving into that a bit more into the video that will be coming up shortly. Again, we have to think about how wide, narrow we want to be betting turn. So again, on the left, we can see that like on the 4 of heart, like, do we want to be betting wide? It's a bit like we just talked about. Like, how wide do I want to be betting here? Once we bet the flop, like hands like 3s, 5s, 6s, 7s, 9s, 10s, jacks, queens, like those hands want to be betting. Like if you have a hand like ace 4, if you have a hand like ace deuce, like all those hands wants to be value betting. So we want to choose a sizing that fits our range well. And also we acknowledge the fact that villain can still have a bunch of trips in his range, so we don't want to go crazy. David is asking, can you explain why 2/3 is appropriate here rather than 1/3? I mean, it's just because like we're in position. So we can always afford to be putting in a bit more money into the pot when in position. So overbetting doesn't really make sense here, but betting something like 2/3 definitely makes sense because we always have the luxury to check back on the river if we don't like the river card. And we get to showdown instantly. But when we're blind versus blind, we're going to see that the sizing actually shifts. So really good question. Oh, you mean on the flop? I mean, because it's a really good board for us. So it's a super good board for us that we can bet super aggressively, and we can be betting our entire range for a small sizing. We talked about that, like maybe you weren't there for the last webinar where we talked about like how should we approach flop strategy. But okay, cool. So welcome, happy for you to be here. But so we talked about it where like in these type of spots where it's a really good board for us. I mean, we can be betting at a super high frequency with a small sizing. So we're basically betting our entire range here. No problem. All right, so we saw on the left that we can still be betting quite wide. I mean, we're still betting 60% of the time. That's super wide given the fact that like we still have a really wide range. On the turn here, on the right here, now on the ace turn, it's much different. We can see that it's actually like, this is quite surprising, right? Because at first I like, do you guys find it quite interesting that we don't bet any ace-x on the turn here? I always bet those RIP. It's because, I mean, first of all, villain will have a lot of trips, and also villain's floating range like once he calls the flop, is going to be a bunch of ace-x. So we have so he's going to have folded, like he's going to have like overfolded the flop. So he's going to have folded some hands. We get to the turn with a wide range. He gets to the turn with a stronger range. And also the card connects well with his calling range. So basically what happens is that we have to be checking quite a lot. And then when we do bet, we are actually over betting or checking. And then we bet like a really polarized range to trips or better. But this only happens on the ace turn. That's why I said previously that I thought that the example I actually did was not great in the Jimmy. Like I could have picked something like King Deuce 4 instead of King Deuce Deuce. Diego is asking, versus population that overfold the flop, can we still value betting so thin? Okay, so I'll redirect the question back to you again. Do you think that we're value betting thin here on the right? Or you're talking about the left? Yes. I mean, versus the left, you're totally right. When they overfold, we cannot be betting as wide for sure. But what I would do is that, like, even if he overfolds a bit, the general concept or the general idea of the situation is that we have to be betting at a pretty decent clip. So let's say we're not betting like 60% of the time, we might be betting 45%. So we can just start by checking a bit more hands like queens. And then, I mean, I would still bet hands like 5, 6, 6s, 7s all the time. You know, probably not bet a hand like ace, king, ace, queen, ace, jack, you know, so like those hands that are actually going for really thin value, you know, like we can actually start checking back a bit more. But the general idea behind it is that we still want to be denying equity, so we can still be pretty wide. Maybe not that wide, but we have to be like checking back 80% there, I think is a mistake. Because we can always just check back, you know, with our pocket sixes, pocket sevens, and all that. Okay, so Zanker is saying, are we never checking any trips on the left? So yeah, this is a common concept where in spots that we are actually betting aggressively, the strong hands actually get bet at a high frequency. So so hands like let's say we would actually bet something like, I don't know, like a bit less than 60%, then those hands would get fast played a bit less. And in spot, for example, where you would check a bit more, then you would start slow playing a bit more as well. But I think like in this situation, it's kind of like a unique situation where like it's a trip board that is relevant to both. But in general, like let's say, once you work with solvers and let's say you have like a situation that you only bet 20% of the time, you're going to see that like Pio is slow playing quite a bit as well. So it's going to be slow playing quite a lot of strong hands, which I would not really advocate, because once you start taking a look into like, okay, like he's checking like middle set in a 3-bet pot on like, let's say the board is like ace, 8, deuce, rainbow, small blind versus button, and you see bet your entire range on the flop. Like you need to be checking something like 80% of the time on the turn, and then it's checking like 100% of eights. It's checking like all the 2 pairs and all that. But once you start taking a look into button strategy facing a check, I mean, it's just ridiculous. Like people are not bluffing that much and they overfold and all that. So like I would just try to fast play a bit more if I was in your shoes. So, I mean, the general idea I wanted to say is that like the higher we want to bet in terms of frequency in general, the higher the strong hands will be bet. And the more we want to be checking in a certain spot, the higher the the lower the frequency at which the really strong hands will be bet. All right. So now let's get into some basic concepts. So in general, when turn is a complete blank, it's usually a clear overbet or fold spot. So let's say like the board is queen 10 deuce, turn 4. It doesn't really change anything. So when we want to be betting with a polarized range, and we use polarized strategy with a big sizing. When turn is not a blank and brings like a lot of two pairs, a lot of straights, especially with the offsuit combos, we can then size down with our entire betting range. So same thing on flush turns, example like queen 10 deuce, turn 9. We can, like, he's going to have a bunch of like queen 9, 10, 9, jack 8 suited, king jack off, all those type of hand that he's going to have in his range. So I'm still going to be betting a polarized range on the turn. I mean, it's not like we can just be betting a hand like 9x or 10x on the turn. I mean, we're still going to be betting like a strong top pair or better. So, but again, his range connects really well with that board. So instead of going with maybe like, I don't know, like 140% pot, if the turn was a 4, I'm probably going with something like 90% pot or something like that. A sizing that I still can value bet, but like I still acknowledge the fact that it's a pretty good turn card for him. Yes, this is especially true out of position, blind versus blind. We'll be covering that soon. Also, guys, make sure that you don't overbet so big that you cannot value bet a good top pair type of hand on the river. So I see a lot of people where like they overbet like 2x spot on the turn, and then they're like pretty strong top pair type of hands. I mean, like you isolated villain's range so much that like you cannot even value bet that on the turn. I mean, unless it's a really wet turn, there's 2 flush draws, multiple straight draws, all that type of stuff, and you think that like, okay, on the river I will not be able to be value betting a whole lot, then sizing up to like 150 or even 175 on the turn, I think is fine in those situations. But like on a dry turn, like going super big, you just start to make villain's life easy because he just needs to fold more, and also you isolate his range a bit too much, so you can even value bet like a hand like a strong top pair, good kicker type of hand. Also in some spots, Payo is using like really big overbets. So let's say the board is 7-4 deuce rainbow. Turn jack, it's using like 2x spot in those situations. But like, again, like exploitatively, I think using a smaller overbet in general will be a better strategy. People will still overfold, and we don't want to go too big. That will make his life easy. Does anybody have questions? There's also like I just mentioned, there's going to be other situations as well. There's a few situations that I'm going to be taking a look over into the video I'm going to be releasing soon. But do you guys have any questions about that so far? Yes, Luria, I think that's a good question where, like, if you're playing in a really big pool, right? You're playing in a really big pool. So you're playing 50 Zoom, there's 300 entrants. People will not really notice that. So, like, if you build yourself a good default strategy, but you know that, like, you overbet with bluffs and you're unbalanced because people are overfolding versus that, and then you're using, like, a 2/3 sizing or 3/4 with your value range, I think it makes some sense, but make sure that like you do it versus people that will be unaware of, or if you're playing against a really big pool as well. But yes, I do think it's I think it makes some sense. No problem. All right. So let's move on to the other position segment now. So general guidelines. After c-betting the flop out of position, we're talking about when we c-bet our entire range. We need to be checking a lot more than button versus big blind. So there's a lot of spots where, as the button, we can be betting like 60% of the time, or 50% of the time, or 40%. Like that drops down quite a lot when we are out of position in blind versus blind situation, especially on high boards. Like once we bet the flop with our entire range, and we get called, like we have to be checking, like in general, about around 80% of our range. And that would be even more if people are actually overfolding, and which is the case. So like that would be like in real life even more than that, because like Pio versus Pio, or solver versus solver, I mean, it's not overfolding, it's playing the best strategy it can, but like people that we are facing are actually not doing that. So like they're going to be overfolding. So we're going to be, it's a bit like it's always the same concepts. It's like when somebody in the big blind overfolds, we start raising super wide from the small blind. So we start raising like a really wide range. So when he calls, like we cannot just go crazy by c-betting too much, because we're getting to the flop with a really, really wide range, and he's getting to the flop with a really, really tight range. So all the EV we basically made from him overfolding pre-flop, if we start just barreling like crazy, I mean, we're just giving part of it back to him. It's again the same thing, where once we c-bet the flop full range, he's going to be overfolding. So we get to the turn with a pretty wide range, and he gets to the turn with a tighter range. So that means that we want to be checking quite a lot. August is saying,